is how legends are made.
Hello again, Homewood Patriot fans. I hope you've enjoyed our trip through Homewood history as told through the interviews with 15 legends. It was my intention that this project be focused mainly on telling the story of Patriot football, using the interviews as a means of doing so. I think they all did a great job of doing that, and along the way, the names and contributions of many of their teammates were discussed, along with coaches. It's impossible for everyone that ever contributed to Homewood's success being named in a series like this, as that would literally run into the thousands. I hope, therefore, that no one has felt left out. I hope that the discussion of Homewood Patriot football that we've done here has honored everyone that played a role in Patriot football history. With that said, how did I pick my legends? Well, let's talk about my criteria. I had several criteria. First, they had to still be in the top 5 of the various stats in Homewood history. They had to be honored by being on an all-state list and or some other award. They had to be selected to play in an all-star game. And they had to have played a sport in college. Even still, with those criteria, that left a lot of people out. In some cases, glaringly so, which meant I had to make some very difficult choices. So, in the spirit of full disclosure, let me list the folks that I had the hardest time keeping off the list. We'll call them the honorable mentions. First of all, on defense, Stan Galbraith, number 1 all-time in Homewood history for tackles with 457. Wound up playing college football at Mars Hill. Jody Brandt, number 1 in tackles in Homewood history for a single season. He had 204 in 1986, and he's the 3rd leading tackler in Homewood history. Aaron Feld, number 1 in sacks in Homewood history, played at Mississippi State and is the current strength and conditioning coach at Miami. Mark Robbins, number 1 in Homewood history for interceptions. He played at Auburn in the late 1970s and was a very important cog in the first state championship team at Homewood. Running back Stephen Freeman, and now he's probably the most glaring omission of them all. He's the number 3 rusher all-time in Homewood history. He had 3,800 career rushing yards and was All-State twice. Again, perhaps the most glaring omission on the list. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Bragg Knott, who has the number 1 completion rate for a season in Homewood history. He had 68.9 completion rate in 2001, and he was a state championship quarterback in 2000. Woods Ray. Woods is number 2 in touchdown passes in Homewood history. He had 47 in his career. He's number 2 in yards for a quarterback, passing yards. He had 5,013, and he's currently now playing quarterback for Dartmouth. Larkin Williams. He's number 1 in career completions at Homewood with 403. He's number 3 in yards in Homewood history with 4,531. And as I'm sure many of you know, he's currently coaching for Homewood. New quarterback coach. Let's talk about a kicker. Johnny Clark, All-American kicker. One of only 3 All-Americans in Homewood history. He has the 2nd and the 4th longest field goals in Homewood history, 53 and 50 yards. And he played at Vanderbilt. John Yarbrough, offensive lineman. He was 2nd team All-State, played at the University of Richmond, and has had a 10-plus year career as a professional football player, making rosters in the NFL, the Canadian League, the XFL, and now the UFL. And lastly, offensive lineman Jordan Sims. All-American, not All-State, All-American. 330 pounds, 6'4", big guy. played at Ole Miss, and is currently their assistant strength and conditioning coach. So those are my honorable mentions that I had a very tough time keeping off the list. And yet, that still leaves many other names left unlisted, such as Wade Kirkpatrick, who was first-team All-State in 1974, was an important piece of the first state championship team, and who played at LSU. Brian Blazek, who was honorable mention All-State quarterback, led the Patriots to their second state championship in 1995, and that was after 2 decades of coming up short. And he finished his playing career playing at Southern Miss. And Chris Souther, the All-State kicker on the 2002 state championship team, that still holds the state record for the longest field goal in a state championship game. But again, I hope everyone in some way has been honored by this project, whether their names was mentioned either in the list that I just had or in the interviews that I did with their teammates. So, after taking a look at Homewood High School football history, which team emerged to me as the best ever? Well, let me give you my top 10, starting with 10 and working down. Now, there were several factors that I used to decide my top 10. Lists like this are always, open for debate. So this is hardly definitive. But the factors that I used was they had to have won a state championship or been a state runner-up, a state finalist. I factored in their margin of victory over their opponents. And then I also factored in the number of honored players they had, either as All-State or honorable mention All-State. So here comes my top 10. Number 10, the 1986 state finalist. They only averaged beating their opponents by about 9 points per game. Of course, offenses didn't score as much as they do these days. And they had 4 honored players, Mike Turley, Eric Roy, and 2 of our legends, Doug Gann and Chris Rebels. Number 9, the 1990 region champs and state finalists. They averaged beating their opponents by 13 points per game, and also had 4 honored players, Brian Greer, Damon Southward, Eric Rebels, and one of our legends, Robert Davis. Number 8, the 1994 region champs and state finalists. Average margin of victory, 10 points. Had 7 honored players, Rob Lampkin, Mike Wilford, Mark Andrzejewski, Kevin Studinka, John Stewart Jackson, Jacob Pugh, and our legend Cole Kublik. Number 7, 2001 region champ and state runner-up. They averaged beating their opponents by 21 points. And they had 7 honored players, Jim Patton, Harlequin Sanders, Cornelius Rogers, Chris Souther, Antoine Dunn, and 2 of our legends, Brandon Thornton and Parker Gargas. Number 6, the 2000 region and state champ. They defeated their opponents by an average of about 19 points per game, and they had 5 players honored as All-State. Riley Strauss, Matt Allison, Jeremy Schatz, Colt Byram, and Chris McCauley. Number 5, the 1974 region champs and Homewood's first state championship team. Average margin of victory, 15 points per game, and they had 5 honored players, Wade Kirkpatrick, Rick Powers, Pat Weaver, Mark Robbins, and our legend Murray Legg. Number 4, the 1995 state championship team. They defeated their opponents by an average of about 14.5 points per game, and they had 8 players honored as All-State. Tasker Hewitt, Ryan Mitchell, Ryan Greer, Paul Holcomb, John Stewart Jackson, Fabian Crenshaw, Chris Benton, and Brian Blazek. Number 3, 2004 region and state champs. They defeated their opponents by an average of about 19 points per game, and they had 9 players honored as All-State. Steve Freeman, Stan Galbraith, Rodney Shepard, Robert Gentry, Michael Thompson, Michael Painter, and our legends, Austin Hubbard,
David Ross, and Tim Hawthorne.
Here we go with the top two. The 2002 state champs, who defeated their opponents by an average of 25 points per game, and they had 8 players named to All-State list.
Taylor Barker, Roderick McLean, Freddie Young, Chris Souther, Brent Durbin, Andrew Reed, and our legends Brandon Thornton and Parker Gargis.
And then, number one, the team that I think is the best team ever in Homewood history, and this probably is no surprise to anybody, the 2005 region and state champs, who defeated their opponents by an average of 31 points per game, by far the largest margin of victory of any of these teams. And they had a whopping 11 players honored as All-State players. Again, also more than anybody else.
Steve Freeman, Stan Galbraith, Scott Lee, Robert Gentry, Michael Thompson, Mike Oliver, Daniel Hayes, Aaron Feld, and 3 of our legends, Austin Hubbard, David Ross, and Tim Hawthorne.
So my number one team all time in Homewood history was the 2005 region and state champs. That's my opinion. But let's return one last time to Coach Jones and Coach Gann, the two guys that have seen more Homewood games and been involved in more Homewood games than anybody, and hear what they have to say about who they think was the best team in Homewood history. Doug, you start.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you can go against a 15-0 team. I mean, that 05 team was undefeated. We had probably 10 guys sign off that team. I mean, the crazy thing, I remember we felt like we would win it in 05. Felt like, because all those guys were going to be seniors. Well, 04, we won it, in 04, which, we were happy about, but wasn't, that was kind of a surprise. We weren't expecting that. We thought 05 would definitely be our year. And so the one thing I'll say about that 05 team is I've never coached a team or been around guys that it didn't matter who we played, they were going to try to beat you down. I mean, they just, we had some lopsided scores in those games that year too. And I'll be the first to say, I'd tell my starters, I said, if y'all do what you're supposed to, you're only going to play a half. And our guy, and that's a lot of times what they did. They never played down to the competition. They went out there and took care of business and punched people right in the mouth right from the get-go. And, the only scary thing about that year was if we had to play a 4-quarter game, which we did. I think it's Ben Russell in the 3rd round or 4th round of the playoffs. Would our guys be able to do it, because they never had to do it during the year hardly. And so that was kind of the thing I was kind of concerned about is, playing 4 quarters, just because, we were beating people pretty good there during their stretch there, and they weren't getting a whole lot of reps during the game because we were taking them out. So, but I would have to say the 05 team, like I say, it's hard to argue a 15-0, team not being the best one for sure. And I'll give a lot of credit to the 2000 team when they got, as far as got the stretch going there, a 6-year stretch. 2000 we won it, 01 we came in second, 2 we won it, 03 we got beaten the semis. And talking about that, Brandon was hurt that night. I don't know if y'all remember, he had a thigh issue or something. He could barely run, and definitely hurt us, him not being, anywhere close to full speed. But he tried to play and, did the best he could, but he just was nowhere near 100%. And then so Briarwood beat us that year in 03. Then we went in 04-05, and then we jumped to 6A in 06 and make it to the quarterfinal. So we had I guess a 7-year stretch or 6-year stretch of being highly competitive. And, like I say, I give that 2000 group a lot of credit for getting us going.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up.
I would
go ahead, Coach.
I would add in there the 1991 team. Davis' senior year, that we lost in the quarterfinals to Getson there at our place, and with a mishandled snap on a field goal that we,
in overtime,
if we kick it in overtime, we continue on, and we ended up in overtime because of a missed handoff to Robert, which will easily, we would have easily scored on, and that was a that was an amazing team in itself.
Yeah.
A different style team.
Yeah, totally
High
different
team
style.
control. A lot of control. Good defense, really good defensive team. And Gaston was the same way. I think we were both undefeated in that game, and they went on to win the state championship that year. So that was a very good football team as well. There were other good teams and things that we did, but you know, just go look to see if you can find another undefeated football team in the history of Homewood High School. Let me
Yeah,
know
you
if you
can't.
find it, because you won't. You can't.
So you're bringing up 91, but you're still going to vote for the 05 team as being the best.
Yes, I would. It's just hard. So many people were back from the '04, and like Doug was saying, we were a little bit surprised, uh, you know, pleasantly surprised, but
Mhm.
that we won that game. And of course, we played it real quick about at the Barons field, played out at the Met,
Yeah.
that year, and so that was a little different. But yeah, that was a bit of a pleasant surprise, but it wasn't like during the year we were thinking, well, we ought to be back in the championship game. We thought we probably had a chance, but in '05, it was like, if we don't get back there, it ain't gonna be their fault because the
Yeah.
talent is there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what stands out to me about that 05 team the most is during the regular season, at the end of the regular season. You got 3 games during that regular season: Briarwood, Benjamin Russell, Vestavia. And I mean, that's an amen corner if there ever was one. And they roll through those 3 games. And I distinctly remember after winning that Vestavia game, I was walking out of the stadium and I said to myself, I think I just saw the best team in Homewood history. And then the playoffs and the championship game, proved that to be true.
I confirmed it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, for
No
sure.
doubt. That was the
But
year that when I would sit down in a coaches meeting and ask Doug what he wanted to do on third down, we'd be talking about down distance situations and just discussing those things towards the end of the week. What do you think about the Doug? It don't matter. Just call something. And he'll have to admit it too. Anytime during the game, if I ask a suggestion, what do you think, Doug? It don't matter. Just call something.
Well, yeah, I'm
they were
not gonna
that
say.
good, huh? That you knew they were going to execute no matter what you called.
Well, Glenn, I'm not gonna. Yes, and there was one year. It was the '02 season, I think. Coach Jones said, "Well, what do you want to run the first play of the game?" And I said, "Well," and I'm not gonna say who we were playing, but it was somebody that was clearly outmatched. And I said, "What do you want to score on the first play of the game or the second play of the game?" And he goes, "I want to score on the first play." So I said, well, "We're gonna run this then," and we did. And it was a touchdown, And so,
That's great.
we had some, when your guys execute, and and like I said, practices, it was I just remember our guys I don't ever remember us having just sorry practices. I mean, that our guys, they came to practice, and the expectation was to be great. And I think you know like I said, Friday nights seemed probably a lot easier than going during the week, probably, against some of the teams we had to play for sure.
Weren't those guys great? This series wouldn't have been what it was without them coming in and helping me to complete a couple of episodes when I didn't have the particular legend available to interview. And man, you could sit down and talk Homewood football with those guys all day long, and never run out of great stories. They're both really good storytellers and an asset, to say the least, to Homewood Patriot history. Listen, besides the football that all the guys I interviewed shared with us, I hope you also enjoyed the so-called rapid fire sessions that were an attempt to place these guys within their time period, giving us a bit of nostalgia along the way. So think about this. We started out with Murray Legg discussing 8-track tapes and the smell of pot wafting over the 1970s football field. Moved on to the 80s and cassette tapes, the 90s and the early days of the internet and social media, the new millennium with its burned CDs and iPods and the tragedy of 9/11, and then we ended with Griffin Gentry voting for the first time in 2016 and listening to his music on his phone, something that we would have never dreamed of back in my day. I'm also proud of the fact that Rick Carley came aboard to discuss the start of Channel 6's Sideline Show, which forever changed the amount of exposure high school football got on TV. And I'm also proud that we heard from the first female drum major, Martha Ann Cole, which gave us a chance to drop in some Homewood band history and acknowledge their role in the story of Homewood football. Further, besides the impact of their coaches, all the players vividly recalled teachers that had major impacts on their lives, and every one of them talked about their appreciation for Homewood's diversity, which I'm always proud to talk about and to say has been a characteristic of our great school district from day one. It was a great thrill also for me to talk to guys that played for coaching legends like Bear Bryant, Pat Dye, and Nick Saban, as well as guys who had long NFL careers, 2 that played in the Super Bowl, 1 that won a Super Bowl, and 2 that won national championships. As I discussed with Tim Hawthorne, there's no reason for any player to feel that they have to go to some school like Hoover or Thompson in order to fulfill their football dreams. Homewood can help you get where you want to go. But where is the Homewood story now? Griffin Gentry was our 15th legend, and his senior year was 2015, Coach Ben Berguson's second year leading the Patriots. Since then, Homewood has made the playoffs every year. No other coach in Homewood history has taken every one of their teams to the playoffs, by the way, other than Coach Berg. Although they did finish with losing records in 2016 and 2019, Homewood has won 2 region championships since 2015. They've had 3 10-win seasons since 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2022. And their deepest playoff run came in 2018. Playoff runs came in 2018 and 2022. And in 2022, they made the 3rd round. Sadly, however, it's a new era in high school football, as recruiting plagues the sport more and more, and NIL is about to make that worse. Still, the best Patriot team in the Berg era was probably in 2022, highlighted by a trio of all-state players on offense: Woods Ray at quarterback, Jackson Paris at wide receiver, and Jackson Brooks on the offensive line, as well as honorable mention All-State defensive back Parker Sansing, who's currently, by the way, on the University of Alabama roster. The team scored more points than any Homewood team in a decade, losing, as I just mentioned, in the 3rd round of the playoffs to eventual champion Saraland, 56-57. That game was one of the most dramatic playoff games in Homewood history, as the Patriots came up literally 1 inch short, and that's debatable, of winning the game in overtime. Had they won, and again, it's debatable whether or not they did, but had they won, it's very, very likely that they would have gone on to be Homewood's 7th championship team. As it stands at the moment, in 52 seasons of football, the Patriots have won 18 region championships and 6 state championships, producing 116 all-state players. Right? Now you see why it was difficult for me to limit it to so-called legends. And those 116 all-state players includes a Super Bowl champ and 2 college national champions, as I mentioned earlier. But the next Homewood Patriot football milestone will be the program's 400th victory, which will most likely come during this 2024 football season. When that happens, it will not only be the legends that got the Patriots there. Every Homewood player, coach, assistant coach, support and training staff member, cheerleader, band member, parent, and fan will have played a major part in that accomplishment. So I encourage all of you to come out to games this fall, 2024 season, and let's get that 400th win for Homewood Patriot history. I've only got one last thing to say to wrap up the whole series, and you know what that is. Hooray for Homewood.